Thanks for tuning into another Dolphins podcast where the narratives are alive and thriving. The Dolphins are forced to pick up the pieces after a 30-17 win by the Packers snapped the team's 3-game losing streak. Houtz, how are you feeling after another primetime, cold weather loss?
Probably like a clown, right? I mean, I feel like I once again thought it might be different. I mean, I don't know why they keep sucking me back in and I keep allowing it, but I mean, we knew the narratives, we knew everything surrounding this game, the narratives, and then just as a fan, right? You wait around all day, and that just seems to be the MO when you wait around all day for a primetime game. They poop the bed. So, yeah, man, not many narratives put to rest, and I'm feeling pretty down to be completely honest. How are you doing, man? I mean, 30-17, I'm feeling pretty down. How are you?
Dude, you said 3 words and you got me to start laughing, so I'm instantly doing better. You always make me feel a little better that we all feel the same way. And dude, you kind of hit the nail on the head where you reposted on Twitter, and I'm not going to call anyone out here, but the second you're flying to Green Bay as a Miami Dolphins fan and you're singing the fight song around a bunch of Green Bay fans, you should know right there we're all universally doomed. And Josh, I want to start right at the top for this game because Packers started the game with the ball. It was a 3-play drive where it was they got -4 yards and were forced to punt. I think Jordan Love had a real cool throw to Jaden Reed where he was like skipping on one leg and he overthrew him. Felt pretty good for about 4 seconds, Josh. Malik Washington, he's returning the punt. Basically, I don't know how to say. He fumbled it. The wind took it. I don't know, man. It was a pretty disappointing play. Jason Garrett right there, then and there. This is what happens when you get a cold weather or a warm weather team coming to play in Wisconsin, in Green Bay. Josh, I got to ask you, man. Braxton Berrios, he was supposed to start the year as the punt returner. He's on injured reserve. We know how sound, we know how consistent he was. We're at Thanksgiving. The Dolphins had a chance to return to 500. They were 5-6. Is it crazy to ask why do we have a 6th-round rookie back there returning punts when you have Tyreek Hill making $30 million and having 1 reception in the first half, when you have Jalen Waddle making $30 million and he had 1 reception in the first half, Odell Beckham's on the roster, Javon Holland has experience returning kicks. Like, are we really down that bad where we're going to let Jason Garrett 4 plays into the game say, wow, man, these warm weather Dolphins, they can't play here?
Yeah, and you could have threw Raheem Mostert's name out there, right? With how he's been in the doghouse. I mean, he would have been perfect for that. But yeah, I don't know why, and in that situation, if we have Tyreek Hill back there, Jalen Waddle, and something happens, I mean, then we're sitting there questioning that. So I don't know. I think that's above our pay grade. This is probably another reason why Danny Crossman deserves the axe, and probably another reason why I should have, dressed my face up like a clown, because I don't know that I appreciated Berrios as much as maybe I should have. We didn't see the flashy plays, the returns for a touchdown, Ted Ginn style, but we would have saw him field that ball no matter how much of a knuckler it was. We all saw the thing shift at the last second, but in that moment, man, you just knew as soon as that ball hit the ground, you knew Green Bay was picking that thing up, and you knew that was the end of the game. As sad as that may have been, I felt like it was just over in that instance.
When the special teams continues to be an issue, there's the fumble right at the start. The Dolphins don't invest any money in this unit at all. How can you let this be such a game-changing momentum swing? I completely hear what you're saying. I mean, Preston Williams comes to mind, someone you don't want back there returning kicks. But, I mean, you need to get usage out of somebody who's taking $30 million against the salary cap. 6th-round rookie Malik Washington, I think he also had a bobble on a reception later in the game. It's just real frustrating where you have these talented playmaking pass catchers, and you're sitting there kind of relying on that 6th-round rookie. And I think there was also a play later in the first half, a punt return that the Packers were able to break away on. So special teams, breaking news, continues to be a huge, huge, huge issue for the Miami Dolphins. So Josh, after the fumble, 3-play, 9-drive drive, 3-play, 9-yard drive, holy moly, sorry about that, Jaden Reed scores a touchdown, and it was amazing, man, how quickly this game fell over. Miami had 5 plays in the first quarter, 1 drive for a total of -3 yards, trailing 14-0. I mean, it's insane, man. It is insane that you walk into this game thinking, hey, maybe this is it, right? You can limit Josh Jacobs. Let's say somehow the Dolphins limit Josh Jacobs to his season low yards per carry, which they did. And you put the ball in Jordan Love's hands. He doesn't throw an interception. He doesn't get sacked. And all of a sudden, you're just down so bad. It's so incredible how things can go so poorly so quickly.
Yeah, maybe I'm in the I mean, I can't be in the minority with this, but we're sitting here, we're watching these games, and whenever we play like a, respected team or a playoff caliber team, it feels like the Dolphins have to do everything perfect to even stay alive in that game. I mean, again, as soon as this ball hit the ground, we knew it was over. I'm gonna be honest, man. I was pretty old and washed yesterday. I fell asleep. I woke up. I must have missed like the second quarter. Woke up right as Devon Achane scored in the third, so I got to see things once it started to heat up. But just to see, the Dolphins come out and, for lack of a better word, just look ultimately flat, whether it was the inexcusable penalties that we've seen all season long creeping way back up, or, misses towards the end of the half. I mean, everyone wants to talk about Tua missing Achane. There were a couple throws there towards the end of the game, but this was not at all on Tua Tagovailoa. I just don't know where you point the blame, Jake. Do you point it at the missed tackles, the infinite missed tackles? Do you point it at coaching? Like, who's to blame at this? I mean, I know a lot of people on Twitter or X are pointing the finger at Tua, but I can't do that.
I think you can. I think you look at that first half and the offense only scored 3 points. I think there were some overthrows. There was an overthrow to Tyreek. There was a play that I think Baldy did a great job breaking down where you had Jalen Waddle running over the middle. It even looked like Jonnu Smith was breaking out of the backfield as well. Instead, he overthrew Devon Achane as well. And that's not me saying like Tua's the reason they lost. Tua can't play in the cold. But Josh, I don't think the Packers played a perfect game either. 7 penalties for 44 yards. Yes, the Dolphins had 10 penalties. Yes, they turned the ball over and the Packers didn't. But it just seemed like whenever the Dolphins got going, they couldn't punch it into the end zone. Instead of these drives where it was consistently the Dolphins could get 60% of the way there every single drive, it would have been nice if, instead, in theory, crazy as it sounds, you could load up 2 or 3 penalties on the same drive instead of having them be every single drive you get 1 penalty. That way you could maybe find a way to puzzle piece down the field. But, dude, every single primetime game against a good opponent, it seems like they're pooping their big boy pants. They have the pre-snap penalties. They're having the delay of games. There's the holds. Josh, one of the craziest things I think I saw is Miami's rushing attack has just been so poor this year. And I don't really know where the blame starts. You had Raheem Mostert leading the way with 5 rushes for 19 yards, Devon Achane 7 carries for 14 yards. And dude, next gen stats were insane. The only area the Dolphins could run the ball was behind Armstead. Every other direction, Miami was limited to 0, maybe -2 yards, dude. It was absolutely mind-boggling that there's no diversity in the Miami Dolphins rushing attack. And you see scenarios where it's like I think it was the first and goal play. Achane tried to run behind Kendall Lamb. It got blown up, and that just kind of crumbled that entire drive there where the Dolphins got stopped at the goal line. And it's just crazy, man, how they became so one-dimensional with the amount of talent.
And it just keeps flip flopping, right? 1 second they're one dimensional and they're able to run the ball. The next time they're one dimensional and they're able to throw the ball. It never seems to mesh and all sorts come together. What do we have? 14 carries yesterday for 39 yards on the ground. I mean, inexcusable. And again, some of that is just the inability to be able to run the ball anywhere other than behind Armstead, or some of it's play calling. I mean, some of those the play calls down at the goal line late in the game. I mean, those were just absolutely bizarre. I mean, you had Jonnu Smith, Tyreek Hill off on the sideline in one of the most critical moments of that game. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Jake, they should be out there. Tyreek Hill, if you're not going to utilize him in those situations, get him out there returning punts in these cold weather games where you can flip the field. We see the Eagles way back in the day doing it with Deshaun Jackson. So it's just sad that we see them just become so one-dimensional, and just see the way that defenses have, for lack of a better word, figured them out, right? We're not getting those big plays downfield. We all see the next-gen chart with Tua. He completed 37 of 46 passes. He padded those stats. It looks nice, but at the end of the day, it was nowhere near enough. And when you can't do it against the Green Bay Packers, you sure as hell can't do it against the Buffalo Bills, man. I mean, you're just left wondering, well, what's next?
24-3 was the halftime score. And one of the drives that really derailed the entire game for the Dolphins, I think, it started with just 1:32 seconds left in the first half, where the Dolphins found themselves 3rd and 5, incomplete pass to Malik Washington over the middle, and then Devon Achane, incomplete pass. And that really set up the Packers to do what felt like a 10 to almost a 17-point swing if Miami was able to continue that drive, where, you turn the ball over at the Green Bay Packers 38-yard line. All of a sudden, Green Bay goes 34 yards on 4 plays to kick that field goal. It just seemed like there were these swinging moments where Miami never had those. There was the tipped ball up in the air where Kader Kohu had an opportunity to make a play. Instead, he strains his back, misses the rest of the game. There's a batted ball by Jalen Ramsey that fell helplessly to the ground. There were just these situations where Miami couldn't take advantage. And, I don't know how you feel about momentum, Josh, if it's a real thing, but it just seemed like Miami could never have that game-turning play where it's like all of a sudden there's Tyreek streaking wide open, or all of a sudden Devon Achane breaks one. All of a sudden you get that turnover because the Packers had those plays, whether it was the fumble. I thought Jaden Reed made an incredible one-handed catch that set up the Packers. I think it was inside the 5-yard line where Jordan Love was rolling out to his right, where on the other side you need Tua needing to be perfect. So it's just the balances of where the Dolphins, the room for error just doesn't seem to exist.
And I'm glad you brought up that throw because I mean, there was that, I forget what game it was, but you remember too, he barely got the ball. He threw a pick because he couldn't even get the ball to the sideline. And we got Jordan Love rolling out and he's throwing off his back foot, this seed, right on target, one-handed grab. And I'm just like, like you mentioned it, we have to be perfect when these other teams are able to make mistakes and rebound from it. And it's just a shame that, again, this is our first test before the year, Jake. We sat here and we said, we looked at the schedule that Jordan Love, the Tua Tagovailoa was going to, send Twitter into absolute disarray. And that's exactly what it did. I guess I just want to see the Dolphins hopefully bounce back. I mean, we're sitting here and I feel dead in the water. I feel like the season, hang it up, take us out back. It's over. But you hear Calais Campbell talking about it. You hear Mike McDaniel, Tua, they're sounding like they're not dead in the water yet. But everything we saw in this game, it's leading us to believe that it's just too little, too late. And it's just a shitty situation to be in.
Do you blame the cold weather for this loss?
I mean, I don't, but at the same time, did you hear? I mean, I can't disagree with. I thought it was Cam Newton who said, you can see that the ball comes out of Tua's hands, and the cold affects him, and the way the offense is utilized. I mean, anybody that's ever played football in cold ass weather, I mean, no one wants to. It's harder to throw a football, and it's a lot more difficult to tackle, right? I mean, I don't know that any of us would want to get in Josh Jacobs' way, but we're not making business decisions for millions of dollars. So, I want to say it didn't, but I think between the cold weather and then playing a legit team, I think that all was the perfect recipe for what we did and laid an egg ultimately on primetime once again.
Yeah, I don't think the outcome would have been any different. When I think about Tyreek Hill, the miss to him, when I think about Tua missing Achane, just felt like he was forcing it more than I thought it was the wet or his hands being cold and him just kind of releasing it late. I don't blame the cold, but it's just something we're going to have to deal with. The narrative's there. This is something that is going to be the truth. But Josh, how do you feel about this Miami Dolphins offense moving forward? You have 2 games left against the Jets. You have going to be a cold game in Cleveland. San Fran's going to take the trip all the way to Miami. You don't know what type of condition that team's going to be in. Do you think this offense can figure things out enough to get to that 10-7 mark, win the final games to maybe have a shot?
Man, I would love to sit here and tell you yes, but I mean, after what we saw, I can see them giving us enough hope, stringing us along. Sweeping the Jets, maybe beating the Texans and winning one of those games where was kind of a flip flop. But I just don't see it. Yeah, something like that. And wouldn't that just be the Dolphins way? I mean, that's just. Oh my God. See, you're already setting it up. So yeah, you get it, man. I mean, I'd love to sit here and say they're going to figure everything out, but at this point, I mean, they have to, right? Mike McDaniel's seat's getting a little bit hotter, right? I mean, Chris Greer, his seat's, twerked up there as well. So, twerked, not twerked. Please don't twerk, Chris Greer. But, so they have some tough matchups ahead that they're going to have to figure out. Not tough matchups. That schedule's looking pretty nice, but you know what I mean? They have to find a way to right this ship, if not for anything, to get things started in the right direction next year.
Do you think they have those answers on the roster currently? What are some changes you would make? I'll give you a second to stew. Robert Jones and Isaiah Wynn. That's one I'm instantly thinking. Jones, it seemed like struggled quite a bit. And then you wonder, man, Kendall Lamb, he was kind of iffy, and you wonder, he's been in the league so long, and I'm not trying to be a hater. He announced he's retiring at the end of the year. He's retiring in 2 months, man. You're a professional athlete who's on the verge of retirement. You wonder, can you get Patrick Paul into the mix, comfortable enough at right tackle full time where maybe you can get a little more push that way? Because, dude, it was absolutely pathetic watching the Dolphins run any way outside of being, just behind Teron Armstead. And it also makes you wonder why they even bothered running the ball elsewhere, because it just flat out wasn't working.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Patrick Paul might have got 14 or 16 reps. I forget. I saw a little thing going around, but and he played decent. So yeah, I mean, that'd be where I'd probably start. If Kendall Lamb's even a little bit banged up, let's see what Patrick Paul can do on that right side where, many people thought maybe he couldn't line up. And then Isaiah Wynn, I mean, I think once he was, starting to get comfortable again, they were probably going to bring him back. The biggest thing to me, though, is what are you going to do at linebacker, man? That's between that and safety. I mean, those seem to be spots where next season you're pretty much dead in the water, right? We had Anthony Walker start to look nice. He got hurt. I mean, you can definitely see a difference with Tyrell Dotson out there. Jordan Brooks was missing tackles. I mean, and again, that's where I think the cold weather truly came into play, was right with those missed tackles and, making business decisions. But I'm spiraling out of control, man. I don't know that there's moves I'd make on the roster. I guess I'd go back in time and maybe invest more in the trenches, right? Maybe more on the offensive side and defensive side, because we had to push Calais Campbell out wide because, they didn't trust Chop Robinson much. And you could definitely see the interior of that kind of whittled away at times. I don't know, man. I don't know what my answer is there.
The Dolphins missed 20 tackles. The league average is 8. And the Dolphins looked tired. They missed 12 tackles against the Patriots, and I think most of those came in the second half. And I think those type of issues are amplified when you're playing in the cold. Josh, also too, on a short week, I don't want to make excuses here, but when you're getting absolutely pulverized by Josh Jacobs play after play after play, let me read you this stat, because nobody could believe me when I posted this on Blue Sky, when I posted this on Twitter. Josh Jacobs, 58 of his 43 yards came after contact. That just speaks to how consistently Miami was getting to him in the backfield. He was not only getting back to the line of scrimmage, but then he was also going for positive yardage. And that's considering he was only 19 for 43 with a touchdown on the night. Like, that is so bad where you can't make a play. Something I thought that was so insane too, just to kind of put into the scope of how different these defenses look. The Dolphins ran a sweep with Achane, and it was absolutely blew up in the backfield. He was spun down like a top. Packers ran the same play the next drive with Jaden Reed. It was the longest run of the night for the Packers. Emmanuel Ogbah saw it, and it looked like he discovered fire for the first time. It was like it was a play that nobody saw coming, and it's just crazy how you had these two defenses, one locked in, one very aware and ready to go, and the other one like a step behind. And two, Josh, we can't expect this defense to not be a step behind. Tyrell Dodson joined the team a week ago. Emmanuel Ogbah was signed right when the season started. Like, this wasn't the way it was supposed to be, and these are issues, but I'd argue that, hey, you have some pretty expensive players on the offensive side of the football. Gotta have them pick up the slack and be elite and be amazing, and that's also a tough ask on the road in the cold on a short week. I don't know, man. It's tough.
It is, and you can just point the finger every which way, and honestly, the blame goes everywhere, right? Everyone wants to point it at Tua and talk about his cold weather narrative in the prime time and the big games, but it's a Mike McDaniel thing. It's a Miami Dolphins thing that we've seen, for forever, Jake. And you mentioned it a little bit. They did do a good job. I think 2.3 yards per carry on the ground with Josh Jacobs, but it was what he did in the pass game, right? The 4 catches, 74 yards. Sorry, I was looking at our good friend Tucker Kraft, who was a tight end that we loved, and he absolutely went out there and balled out. He was making people miss. So what I was saying is they still found a way to get him the ball, and he was just joke. Dotson got sent to the shadow realm. I think you saw Javon Holland miss, Jordan Poyer. I mean, it was just a huge issue. And those, again, are those guys that either are paid or want to get paid, and they just need to step up in big games. And it just seems like no matter what it is, the cold, late in December, no matter who they're lined up against, man, they just willed away, and the moment just seems too big. And I want to say next year it'll be different. I want to say they'll find a way out of this. I want to say that we have the answers, but we don't, man. And we haven't for 2 decades now.
I don't want to use excuses, but I just cannot believe the drop-off of Javon Holland. And you think of the fact he's playing with a broken hand. I assume that's not fully recovered yet. He has a knee injury as well. Those things are amplified in the cold as well. There's not a lot of depth in this defense. You see them trying to get Patrick McMorris involved, but I mean, Jordan Poyer looks cold out there, which is crazy, someone who was a longtime Buffalo Bill. And Josh, to speak to your point here about how bad the linebackers and safeties were, missed tackles. Josh Jacobs forced 10 missed tackles. Jaden Reed 4, Tucker Kraft 2, Dontavian Wicks 2. Josh, the fact that the only 2 wide receivers to force multiple missed tackles combined for 6, that's pretty impressive when you consider you were without Cater Kohu went down. You had Storm Duck out there. Obviously no Kendall Fuller, and suddenly you have it's still a linebacker issue. I just thought that was a very weird thing when you consider the injuries Miami was dealing with.
Yeah, I think Jordan Brooks had a nice comment where he, basically said that the team was playing soft, but it was an everybody issue. And you mentioned it, man. This was not the way things were schemed up or supposed to be, right? You weren't supposed to have Storm Duck, Cam Smith out there. You weren't supposed to have Cater Cove go down trying to get a pick.
Cam Smith got hurt, yeah. And he looks bad, dude. He looks really bad. The cornerback position.
Fangio might have been on something with that. When's Ethan Bonner going to step up?
What's going on there? The fact you can't see Ethan Bonner play, and I don't know, man. That's a tough look, and that goes back to you got to make some sort of move. I still like McDaniel. I think he's the guy, but Greer, man, I'm near the end with him. The Packers' skilled players excelled at gaining extra yardage, season highs in yards after contact per carry, 6.1. And yards after the catch at 188. Josh, this game was over 24-3 at halftime, but it's important to keep in mind the defense did only allow 6 points in the second half. If you're looking for some sort of saving grace, the offense had its moments but couldn't put it all together. And God, man, it's frustrating that we're going to have to hear the same generic things like, oh, Tua can't do this. The defense can't do that. And there's so much more nuance to it, especially when you have 11 players out there. The biggest issue for the Dolphins, especially in the cold, is getting those 11 players all moving in the same direction at the same time. Josh, season ended today. You're picking like 20th. It's a tale as old as time as a Miami Dolphin fan. Who do you want to draft? Well, just give me like a position. I'm leaning like a linebacker. I think safety. You got to reset that entire position. It's starting to look like after the season. Obviously, offensive line is in play too, but where would you think?
Yeah, I think you touched on it. Safety, or I would probably be greedy and want a linebacker, but what? They'll probably go defensive lineman. I mean, that's another area too, right? Defensive
That's
tackle. True. So I would hate to be picking 20th. I mean, either suck the lose out the rest of the year and get us a better pick, or I was gonna say string us along and keep us in the hump, but I don't know what we want anymore, man. I don't know what's better for this team. I know that no matter what, we're gonna be back here and they're going to rope us back in once more, and we're going to get our hopes up next week against – who do they even play next week? Is it the Patriots again?
Yes, Jets. They already played the Pats twice. I'm interested because I don't know if a defensive tackle – like this is a team that's still going to be in win-now mode. McDaniel's going to be here next year. Tua, Tyreek, the squad's going to be here. I don't know if a defensive tackle moves the needle. Even Wilkins, he shined when he was a rookie, and he was a top-tier prospect. But I just wonder – I really like the idea of linebacker, or maybe are you drafting a right tackle to come in for Austin Jackson when he leaves and he starts out as a right guard because Liam Eichenberg's about to be a free agent. He's one of those guys I could see them giving him a 3-year contract and we're all kind of like, yeah, he really evolved into a consistent starter, or nobody signs him ever again. And you're like, yeah, that makes total sense. I could see that one going either way. Maybe left guard is on the books, but I mean, Isaiah Wynn hopefully comes back and plays a little well. I don't know, man. There are a lot of issues with this team and just five games to prove us. They can do enough. I don't know, man. I can't even believe it. But let me ask you this instead. If the Dolphins do win out, do you think that 10-7 would be good enough to make the playoffs?
I'm going to say yeah. I mean, dude, how heartbreaking would that be, though, if they did win out and then it just was still not enough? That would be the ultimate kill, man. That's so Dolphins. That's so Dolphins. We just predicted it.
It would speak to the Dolphins, that the misery that everyone loves. It's like, great, another winning season. Like the Dolphins would go 5 straight years without with winning seasons and yet no playoff wins. And you're just walking this fine line of sucking just enough. It's like in the hunt evolved that next step without being successful, dude. It's absolutely crazy to me. Jets next week. I think if they win out, I think they got a shot. I think the Steelers might be on the verge of losing a couple more games. The fact the Chargers are going to be without J.K. Dobbins, he's been a great engine for that offense. And dude, Justin Herbert's getting his receivers killed. I'm gonna throw that out there just as like a salty Dolphins fan.
Was Deshaun Elliott right though about the soft comments? I mean, this is the perfect week to sit here and be like, oh man, okay, you might have been onto something with that.
Yeah, man. Like I'm sitting here talking about like they're not. Javon Holland's not making tackles because of injuries, yada, yada. Every team's dealing with the same thing. Every team's dealing with injuries. So, yeah, I think for now, until proven otherwise, you got to agree with the soft comment. Before we wrap up, Josh, I do want to talk about the Shaq Barrett developments. He announced he was retiring just before the start of training camp. It was announced 3 days ago that he was prepared, that he was ready to unretire, and that's just days before the deadline where he could be activated from the reserve retired list. Josh, this was a pretty weird story considering that Shaq Barrett, he was on the Kay Adams show early in the season talking about if he was to come back, it would be to play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then you have him coming out and saying he's ready to play. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, says that he'd be open to playing for the Dolphins, not like they have his contract rights or anything like that. Dolphins defensive coordinator, I think this is something we spoke about late last week. He was asked about it the day it happened, and this is when the sirens started to go off in my head. It was so weird that he declined to comment when he heard that news because it was also news to him. So Josh, Shaq Barrett was trying to come back, and he just kind of surprised the Dolphins with this move. What were your initial thoughts just there before we dive into the rest?
Yeah, I mean, what the heck's my first thought is what the heck's going on? And Drew Rosenhaus of all people, that's like a stab in the back a little bit, right? Isn't he our like go-to agent for all the local guys? So, yeah, we were kind of thrown off at the time by the whole report, and it sounded like Anthony Weaver was as well, right? If he had Twitter, maybe he would have found out, but he had no idea, and that definitely sounded the alarms right then and there.
And we've been saying it for weeks. I mean, Chop Robinson, he's really coming on as a rookie. I think he's playing well. I think you're liking the progress, but the Dolphins have been desperate for edge rushing help. Like, this is something where if Barrett was focused on coming back, like, he could have been talking for the Dolphins with weeks, let alone months, saying, hey, I know the Dolphins, you guys are in this situation. Can we figure out some sort of plan where I can get back in the building? Bradley Chubb, he's still hurt. Cameron Good, he's still hurt. You have the Jalen Phillips injury. The second we hear that Anthony Weaver knew nothing about this and Mike McDaniel knew nothing about this, I just got a little frustrated because you're like, man, like, why are the Dolphins always in these stupid scenarios where one thing is, someone's trying to pull a fast one or something's trying to just not happen the way it should have. Like, Shaq Barrett was supposed to be the guy to come in and replace Andrew Van Ginkel. He was supposed to bring another one of those Super Bowl caliber, veteran leaders in the locker room. And just to have something like this happen where he's on the Kay Adams show saying, if I was to unretire, I'd have to go play for the Bucks. People were throwing around that he would want to go to play for the Eagles, man. Like, it's just, why is it always the Dolphins in the middle of the stupidest scenarios possible?
That's so Dolphins. I mean, I don't have an answer for that, Jake, but it absolutely is always, in that situation. Wasn't there a deadline then as well? Wasn't it like Thursday at 4 p.m. or something where they had to make a decision on it? So, I mean, there was definitely they were definitely cahoots going on things going on behind the scenes. I think I saw his image or something. I don't know if it was legit, but I don't know if it was Shaq Barrett's wife or something to do with the Eagles, like you mentioned. And then he said earlier in the year how he'd only want to unretire if he went back to the Bucks. So I don't think he had any interest in playing for the Dolphins. I think he was hoping that this would kind of force their hand, but good for the Dolphins to say, you know what, I like what we have on the roster. I like these guys that have deserved an opportunity. I just wish, he would have done this sooner because we could have absolutely used Shaq Barrett at the beginning of the season, midway point of the season, even sooner than, right before the deadline. So, weird situation, and he even has a void year next year, right, on his contract or something. So I don't know if he comes back next year, don't they have like his rights still? Like, it's just weird situation, weird situation, and you shouldn't have to rely on a 32-year-old when you have Andrew Van Ginkel.
That's what is scratching my head about this whole situation for Barrett, is that since he retired, the Dolphins have the rights to his contract next season as well. So if he was to come back, he'd be on the Dolphins on a 1-year deal still. And then, you'd say, hey, do you trade him or does he stay retired? At this point, I wonder if the Dolphins would just kind of still say, like, hey, yeah, we're not getting rid of the contract rights, just because, man, this is such a frustrating situation where even if it was like earlier in the season, hey, I didn't want to sign here, I want to be released, that's a whole different story. But just to kind of bring it on, you mentioned it, man. This news came out 3 or 4 days before the deadline. That deadline was on Thanksgiving, 4 p.m. And McDaniel basically said, in just talking with Chris Greer, where our roster is at and the players that have earned the right to be on it, it is just the numbers game in the NFL. So the timing, I don't think that was necessarily ideal. And then McDaniel was also asked on if Shaq Barrett was clear with who he wanted to play for. McDaniel said it wasn't any measured situation like that, posturing one way or the other. Like I said, we just found out on that day that I had a press conference with you guys, and it was more of that. It wasn't whether he wanted to play here or there. Josh, but I mean, I still think the point remains, why is he letting people know this late? Like, the communication is so important in a situation like this. And it's just an awkward thing to think that, yes, not only are the Dolphins going to release you, but let you go sign elsewhere and help another team while they're paying you $5.5 billion in a signing bonus this year.
Yeah, it makes no sense at all. I mean, and then he pulled our pants down in a situation where we could have used him most at the beginning of the year. So it makes no sense. Dolphins are always in a situation now. Drew Rosenhaus is going to turn around and try to get some of his clients paid next year, after he just tried to pull this. I mean, weird situation, but this is what we should expect for the Dolphins.
Dude, I wonder if Rosenhaus just has so much power where it doesn't matter. Like, I think he just represents so many players in the league. Like, when you represent 70% of the players, like, can we really sit here and say he has a good relationship with the Dolphins and he lives in Florida and he had some past connections. Like, I think he grew up a Dolphins fan. But all that aside, I think, like, he's just such, like, a force in the free agency and as an agent where like this might not even like they might not even like blame Rosenhaus for this. They might even just look at it as a Barrett and might not even talk about it ever again for good or bad or indifferent. Because I don't think you could just sit here and say like, yeah, Drew, we're done working with you, because then you're just axing it like 80% of the league.
Yeah, and then we get stuck with what is it, like athletes first, or whoever's like breaking all the boundaries, like setting every record, and we don't need. Drew Rosenhaus was already trying to get those huge contracts. We don't need to just dealing with 8 athletes first.
Jesus, man, what a failure of an offseason for the Miami Dolphins. And this was the thing, like you had 70% of the salary cap paid in Waddle, Hill, Tua, and all the moves the Dolphins tried to make in the margins. You tried to cut corners with guys like Jordan Poyer, cut corners with guys like Shaq Barrett instead of Andrew Van Ginkel, cut corners instead of maybe drafting another offensive lineman, and you're just seeing it just blow up in their face time and time again. Josh, I did see that the Dolphins activated Snoop Huntley off injured reserve while keeping Skylar Thompson on the active roster.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. At some point, it has to be Snoop Huntley's job, right? I mean, we saw at least a little bit more out of him than we saw Skylar Thompson, but they love Skylar, so I don't know, man. They might roll with both of them.
It's not, like that's the crazy thing. It sounds like they are rolling, at least for now. I don't know if you're going to activate someone down the road and maybe a Bradley Chubb, and that's where you maybe look at making a change at quarterback. But, dude, that's crazy to me when you won't sign a long snapper to the active roster, that you're just switching these guys out in the practice squad, and you're still keeping Skylar Thompson on the 53-man. He has one snap, and it's a fumble last week. I don't know what's going on there. That's just – there are so many head-scratching roster decisions where I don't even know if you can blame Chris Grier for the backup quarterback situation. Like, Mike McDaniel can come in and put his foot down. He can come in and put his foot down when you have Malik Washington returning kicks. Like, there's some things going on, man, where you just say it out loud and you wonder what the hell's happening in Davie, Florida.
Hopefully we find out soon, right? We got 5 games, and maybe it'll be a little bit more clear, but we know what's going to happen. They're running it back next year, and everyone's going to be angry until it either works or it doesn't.
The Dolphins do, though, have an extended break here before hosting the Jets next week. Hopefully you see Teron Armstead get healthy. If they're going to stick with Kendall Lamb, maybe that's some time for him to rest up as well. Hopefully we'll get to see Kendall Fuller back as well. Josh, am I missing anyone? Or
I think you nailed it. I'm trying to think of who else would be out.
Walker. I mean, it's crazy how this guy was a backup all season. He's out for one game, and all of a sudden Jacobs breaks 10 tackles. Like it's insane. You cut David Long, your former starter. The next week, the guy you replaced him with goes down. Like that. It's so hard, man. It's so hard to be a Dolphins fan.
It is, and we definitely have a tight end problem, right? Like we thought it was Brock Bowers in this, but then our boy Tucker Kraft like going crazy yesterday. I mean, they definitely have issues stopping it, but that could be all Anthony Walker, man.
Linebackers and safeties, man. I think that's where the first round picks gotta
load
go.
Up. And line. We have to bulk up that offensive line, no matter what Chris Grier says.
Maybe if you're drafting like 21st, 22nd, you push up a little bit to that like top 10-ish spot to get that premier linebacker, and maybe you're trading back and you can stomach like a late second round guard or an early third round guard, and those are your 1-2 punch for the year. Ugh. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. What a miserable way to end Thanksgiving. 24-3 at halftime. The game was pretty much over, but as Dolphin fans, we carry on to another week. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. I hope everyone is having a great, relaxing, extended break for Thanksgiving. Go enjoy it. Don't let the Miami Dolphins ruin it. Thank you all so much for listening, and most importantly,
Fins up.
Fins up.